Good evening, Madam President. It's 6 p.m. I've started the recording.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Welcome, everyone, and I hope everybody's safe and warm. We're going to be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Dr. Henderson.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please stand for a moment of silent meditation. Thank you.
Thank you. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Burton? Dr. Henderson?
Here.
Mr. Howard?
Here.
Mr. Levenstein?
Here.
Ms. Mayda? Ms. Mineo?
Here.
Ms. Santiago?
Here.
Mr. Stridiron?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby recesses into executive session for the following purpose: matter made confidential under FERPA, employment history of particular individuals, and to obtain advice from legal counsel. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved. Second.
Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Dr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein?
Yes.
Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Ms. Santiago?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. Mr. Clerk, let me know when it's to go.
The recording is back on, Madam President. You're all set.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. I'm going to turn this meeting over to Dr. Padilla.
Thank you, Madam President and Board Trustees. Good evening, everyone. I have a couple of items for tonight, and I'm going to start with our Operation Reopen update. Just give me 1 second to share my screen. Okay, so here we go. All right, so again, this is part of our regular update to the board and the community. and this evening we have several of them. As you know, we're in the yellow zone, and we have a 2-week window to test 20% of our adults and 20% of our scholars, and that's what this information here references. We want to give a very, very big thank you to our families. It's clear by the amount of waivers that have been turned in, and the fact that now we have many of our schools hitting the 20% for students, that we are on track. Last week, we were able to test 20% of the adults, and the positivity rate came in at a 0.7%. And as of today, with the amount of students that we've been able to test, we are at a 0.8% infection. So just wanted to give that as an update and say we're not there yet. We believe after tomorrow, and certainly by Thursday, that every elementary and every middle school will have hit that target. NFA West would have hit that target. NFA North has hit that target. The one school that we still need participation is NFA Maine. So to our NFA Maine families and scholars, please make sure you get in a waiver so that way we don't run into any issues by the end of this week. So above all, what we're noticing is that when children don't feel well, parents are keeping them home and getting them tested. Much of our positives are children who are home, not children who are in school. And that is obviously based on the fact that parents are keeping their children home and then going to get them tested. So just a big thank you for to our families for getting the waivers in. And again, we're not there yet. Again, we should have just about every single school with the exception of one, and we believe we can get that done by Friday. So again, NFA Maine students and families, please make sure you get in those waiver consent forms. We've gotten some recent information for athletics, and I know the questions are pouring in. Our athletic director, as well as our high school administrators, are fielding a ton of parent and student requests as it relates to high-risk sports. And recently, the governor has indicated that he would allow for high-risk sports to take place, but the local county departments, specifically the health departments, would have to make that decision. There is no decision as of yet in Orange County. It is something that we're working through. But what I know to be true is our Board of Education wants to make sure whatever is decided, it is done in a safe manner. And that is going to be our priority. So if the county ultimately approves for high-risk sports to take place, we will proceed with caution, and we will make sure the safety measures are in place so that way students have a successful experience. And again, this is only winter high-risk sports. Spring sports right now are still on track. As you know, we surveyed our families to get input from them as it relates to the third quarter only. So as you can see here from this model, when we kicked off the school year and surveyed parents way back in early August, the sentiment at that point was that the majority of families wanted children to be fully remote. And that has slightly changed to the majority of families wanting children to be in person. To me, that makes a lot of sense given where we're at. There's testing, there's safety precautions in place. Adults and students in schools are socially distant. They're wearing their masks. They're frequently washing their hands. They're being screened upon entering, and those children and those adults who don't feel well are staying home. So it makes sense why there's this shift. And there's a vaccine, right? Granted, the demand is high and the supply is low. And as you've been hearing and seeing, there's a national push to get more vaccinations to every community across the country. So this is to go into effect February 1st. And then we will make a decision later as it relates to the fourth quarter. Some new information has come out regarding state exams, and we've also have gotten a lot of questions on this. Specifically in our town hall sessions, we've had families asking us, what's going to happen with Regents exams? What's going to happen with state exams? I don't have a final decision for that yet because the state hasn't made a final decision. But what is now public is that the Board of Regents is allowing for public comment through February 5th. So you can go right on to the New York State Education Department website. You can read over the material and provide your own comments for whether or not you believe children in New York should take state exams this year. So you do have that opportunity to provide public comment that ultimately the Board of Regents would consider as they process things that have to take place with the federal government. So state exams are part of ESSA, a federal program. And if New York is to seek a waiver, much of that is going to have to happen through input from the community. So I kind of alluded to this a little bit in the previous slide, but school will begin third quarter with a change in learning model for some children effective Monday, February 5th. All right. We are looking at possible 4-day instructional models, and we will still allow for 100% remote. But the caveat that I gave last time still holds true. If you're a student who has at this point been failing, you're going to receive a phone call from your principal encouraging you to come in. We're going to closely monitor throughout the third quarter to see if you're making any progress before being required to come in. In the end, we don't want our children to fail. And we understand that we're in the midst of a pandemic. This has been a year of many ups and downs, hybrid, 100% virtual. And I appreciate everyone's flexibility, but we have the same goal, and that is to make sure our children are progressing academically, and we need to continue to monitor which model works best for our children, which is why we are strongly considering that the fourth quarter, every child in our district will be required to come in. So I just want to emphasize that this is something still under consideration. And part of this is we don't know what's going to happen in September right now. The vaccines have not made their way through the community the way governments have wanted them to at this point. We don't know if we're going to have to start the school year off in September in a hybrid model. And if that is the case, then I think it's advantageous to make sure every child has an in-person experience this year to prepare for that. The slide is consistent. Just continue to do your part. Protect yourself and protect everyone around you. Keep your mask on. Madam President, any questions or comments?
Board members, Mr. Stridiron, I see you have your hand.
Thank you, Madam President. So I saw the results of the survey of roughly over 2,000 parents. What are the actual numbers of students who've signed up for remote compared to in person? You have to have those numbers by now because next week starts the new phase.
Yeah, we can make that available to you. Again, this is only, the changes were only for families that wanted a change. So what's indicated here is that 2,000 plus families wanted a change. If they didn't want to change, they were not required to take the survey.
So do you have the final numbers on what percentage of students will be remote starting next week?
Yeah, it's in the slide. It's 47%.
So 47% of our students will be at home.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Levenstein?
Thank you. So I just have one informational question on the 20%, and then also to ask about the survey. The 20%, is that 20% of hybrid students in the building? Or is it 20% of all students, including the remote or the 100% remote?
No, it's 20% of in-person students.
In
In-
person? Okay,
Students who are receiving in-person instruction, which in essence, any child in the hybrid model.
okay. And then on the survey, so 80% of our parents did not return the survey, meaning they're going to be in the same spot they were earlier, correct?
Correct.
So my question kind of deals with 8th, 11th, and 12th grade, because if I'm correct, they were all 100% remote the first half.
Correct.
So what kind of response to change them did we get? Do you know offhand in either general or specific? Because if we follow along with the other, if we spread it out evenly among all the grades, that means you will have hardly any 8th, 11th, and 12th graders coming in.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I need to, I'm sorry, someone chiming in. I will get that information for you. You are correct. 8th graders, 11th graders, and 12th were the last to transition back to in-person. All I can share is a lot of them have expressed wanting to come back in, but I want to be able to substantiate that with the actual numbers. So I'll get that to you by Friday.
Yeah, because it doesn't seem to jive with only 10% of the people mailing us. I'm sorry, 20% of the student population mailing it back. So that would just be my concern, that those grades come back at least at 50% like the other. Thank you.
Mr. Howard?
Thank you, Madam President. So Dr. Badia, I guess my question is more about the pandemic and understanding our student population and understanding where our children were pre-pandemic. And we've had this conversation before, and I've asked this question. So what assessments are we using to monitor the progression academically of our students? Because obviously this has been a one and done thing, and it looks like it's going to carry on for a lot longer period of time. But I guess my concern and my question to you, are our children progressing the way they should be progressing? And more importantly, the ones that are furthest from the table, are we doing anything to ensure that they are progressing at a rate that they should be? And what do those interventions look like?
Okay, so there's a couple questions there. We do have formative and summative assessments, irrespective of state exams. So we have, we have something that we do beginning of the year, end of the year, mid-year, and end of the year that we are doing this year. So we are at that mid-year point where we are assessing how children have done from the beginning of the year till now. And we should have those results in probably the next week or two. And then to your next point, to be very transparent, and I have shared this before, it's a mixed bag. We have children who in the brick and mortar struggled, and then in the remote environment are doing very well. And the opposite is very true as well. And this is why we took the position of we're going to make a decision at this point quarter by quarter. So administrators were directed to look over their promotion and doubt lists. In fact, we have a mid-year retreat tomorrow with our principals to double down on our on interventions and being proactive in targeting students who need the most help. So that is work that's underway. But there are concerns. There are concerns that we have a number of children who are struggling. And so this is why I've asked that they receive a phone call, they receive a home visit, and get them to come in. Because at this point, they're struggling. So we need them to come in person. And we're going to closely monitor the third quarter specifically, because if we still see children failing, then they're going to in essence, be mandated to come back in. And you've already heard me talk about the fourth quarter. So this has been a close, we're closely monitoring the impact of our decisions, the impact of our interventions to see what's working, what's not working. For some families, the home visits have worked because children are logging on and such. In other cases, we have done a number of home visits to find empty buildings. It is an ongoing concern.
From a social and emotional standpoint, are we drilling down on that aspect of these young people?
Yeah, our PPS staff is extremely active. They're out as part of the, doing home visits as well. They're trying to link supports. And that's kind of where we're at right now. It's something that we're going to have to continue to monitor to see, by the end of the year, what's been the impact. And, I expect that in some cases we're going to see we were able to, in some ways we really are saving kids. In other ways, we're going to see, and what we're concerned about is that we're going to have a large number of students needing summer school, or they're going to be facing retention. Now, this is not because people haven't tried. We have teachers making phone calls. We have people knocking on doors. We're trying to connect with them every way possible, including connecting with community-based organizations to see if they can help us track down a family that we're having a hard time locating. But I think this is the results of what's happening in our country, and the fact that there are folks that don't feel safe, and we're trying to take it all in and do the best we can.
Dr. Padilla, can we ask Mrs. Moriarty to speak about the Winter Institute and the upcoming Spring Break Institute?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Mineo. And that is another intervention. Thank you for highlighting that as a way to reach more children. So Ms. Moriarty, can you speak to Dr. Roman? You can go in after her just to talk about the work that took place over winter break and what's coming up in February.
Sure. Thank you, Madam President and Dr. Padilla. As reported before, the Early Winter Learning Academy, we had 103 students who parents signed them up. We had an average daily attendance over the 4 days of 76 students. SEL was also a focus besides ELA and math, and each of the students who participated demonstrated growth as monitored in our school pace, which is our ERLA and our NEAL and our ARC monitoring tool. So some grew up more levels and some demonstrated small levels of growth, but every child did grow. Based on that model and the success that we had in the 4 days, we've decided to go ahead and run a midwinter academy for K-5, which we're in the process of just recruiting the students now and getting the information from teachers in each school for recommended students. So we're excited about offering that opportunity. So those are just some of the interventions, and we're planning many more for Spring Break Academy, possible Saturday Academy, evening programs, and of course, a major summer program.
Dr. Roman, do you want to talk about the work that took place over the winter break, please?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Padilla. So we had a Winter Institute, which we planned in coordination with CNI, so as not to conflict with the academic portion of the program. We're going to continue doing the same thing. So right after the academic program, we have a Leadership and Mindfulness Institute that is being funded through the My Brother's Keeper program. So we're aiming to target some of our MBK students, but now we're also opening it up for My Sister's Keeper so that we provide some of our female students an opportunity to also engage. What we're using is the Panorama social emotional learning data that was collected. And so that's going to be the basis for targeting supports for our students to help build their social emotional capacity, as well as provide them opportunities that align with the My Brother's Keeper milestones.
Thank you. Mr. Stridiron, I see your hand.
Oh, thank you, Madam President. I have a question for you. Will the board be voting in the upcoming meetings on reopening the schools to all students as a requirement?
Is that question for me or for Dr. Badia?
For you, yeah, because it's
Oh,
you. Yes, I'm sorry. I thought you heard me.
I don't know. I think we have to talk about that one. I think that I have to talk about that with the board and also with Dr. Badia and Mr. Forget.
Because this was never brought up. It was, in the future, but it was never brought up on how it was going to get done, when it could get done, and the procedures. So I think it would be important for the board to vote on something so important.
Thank you for your input, and Dr. Badia and I will be discussing that. Thank you. Mrs. Burton, I don't know if you're still there. You had your hand up before. Dr. Badia, would you like to go on?
Yes, ma'am. All right. Thank you, everyone, for your comments and your questions. And we'll continue to just keep you updated on what's happening in the district as it relates to Operation Reopen. We're going to move on to 2.2. This is another effort to update the board on transportation. We recall back, we had a consultant, that person presented to you. We've had a follow-up, and here's yet another follow-up. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Coyne and Dr. Spoon.
Thank you, Dr. Padilla. Good evening, everyone. I hope we're all feeling well. I am here tonight to follow up on the presentation that I did last month based on the study that was done by the consultant that we hired, Decision Support Group. We're looking to make some changes to the way the transportation operation looks, and we can see some benefits for that. So next slide, please. So the district's looking to start, first of all, the secondary schools later. We have one of the earliest bell times for the secondary schools in the county. So we're looking to push that back a little to benefit the secondary schools physically. There's been many studies done showing that they can do better in school when they start later. Our transportation model will be more effective. We'll be able to be more on time at the schools than we are now, especially in the afternoon where there is a huge crunch in between the turnaround time in between the tiers of the schools. We're looking to put the elementary students to have them in their zones, consolidate zones to 3, and there will be less time spent on the bus for those elementary students, which we benefit for them, more time for homework, family time, and less time on the bus in general. And overall, we're looking for the cost savings. There will be a cost savings with these rezoning, and we'll be able to benefit from that. Next slide. So I wanted to clarify, we talked about, I guess, in the last presentation, there was difficulty understanding exactly where these zones were. So here they are. I haven't divided up the individual schools. Zone 1 there, you could see, consists of Bombville, Fostertown, and Horizons. And Zone 2 is Gardnertown, Meadow Hill, and Gidney Avenue. And Zone 3 is New Windsor, Temple Hill, and Vales Gate. So you could see them more clear there, since I did not divide up each individual school with a different color. Next slide. Okay, I also wanted to clarify, there was a question about the chart in the last presentation about race and ethnicity. We made the scale the same on each one of these graphs. And to further clarify, each bar has the exact figure percentage for each ethnicity in the zone. Next slide. All right, so what we're looking to do is to start the first tier schools, which is Heritage, South Middle School, and the NFAs later in the morning. Right now, the buses are arriving between 6:50 and 7 o'clock in the morning. We're looking to push that back to 7:10 to 7:20. So about 20 minutes later for the first tier. We're also going to do 20 minutes later for the second tier, moving it from 8:15 or 8 to 8:15 arrival to 8:20 to 8:35. And then the concern about having the students in the third tiers, the elementary schools, getting out too much later, we're pushing the third tier back 15 minutes instead of 20. So the third tier, Baumville, Fostertown, Gardnertown, Horizons, and New Windsor, and the pre-Ks will be 15 minutes later instead of 20. And that would be the new schedule. Okay, go ahead. So the way we are looking to rezone the elementary schools is that the incoming scholars will choose from 3 schools within their zone this coming school year. And the later dismissal time will be offset by the shorter bus route. So the students will be getting home, many of them will be getting home about the same time that they are getting home now. So the later school day will have less of an impact when we have a shorter bus route over time as we phase them in. The goal is to phase in the kindergarten students each year, giving them that choice of the 3 schools within their zone. And after 5 years, that new zoning will be complete and we'll be able to save buses at the elementary school level so that we may use those buses for after-school programs. We did have some difficulty with having buses available for some of those programs. This will free up some of those buses so that we will have them available for it. We can also eliminate buses if we choose and see a cost savings there. Next slide, please. So each bus has 3 tiers in the morning and 3 tiers in the afternoon. Elementary schools are on the 2nd and 3rd tiers. Fewer buses is a cost savings. We'll have to realign the 1st tier routes. We talked a little bit about combining some of the NFA runs. We're also going to have to realign some of those based on the capacity and the ridership in order to save those 1st tier buses, because in order to save the cost of 1 bus, you have to eliminate that bus for all 3 tiers, AM and PM. So we do have to realign some of those 1st tier buses in order to see a savings for a bus. My estimated savings at the end of the phase-in period over the 5 years after all the elementary zones are created is going to be about $300,000 to $400,000 per year for transportation. Okay, that's what I have. Is there any questions?
Board members, any questions or comments on this presentation? Mr. Levenstein.
Thank you, Madam President. So I'm glad that if this goes, that it'll be a phased-in process and you're not going to be removing students that have been in schools for a number of years and switching them. But I wonder if you have the answer to this question. If it was switched today from what we have now to the plan that we're going to implement, do you have any idea how many families would be affected by that? In other words, how many kids are not attending school in the district where they live? Do we have any idea of that?
I don't have those figures. I can get them. I can get a percentage of who's living outside.
That I think may be important to have. How many are only 10% of the kids going to be, or 10% of the families now, because whoever's there is not going to be changed.
Right. The majority of the students do attend their neighborhood schools. So the savings is on those buses that fewer of the students for each school are riding, but we have to send the bus to those further areas to get those students. So that's where the savings is. And there aren't as many. So I don't know the exact figure, so I don't want to say, but I do know that the majority of the students do attend the school that is nearest to where they live. Okay, so that would be good, I think. I would like to know at least what percentage are attending in the zone that they live. And also, there is a lot more to it than how much money we're saving. So, for going into this this plan. So there's other factors, and some of them are good, keeping students that live on the same block going to the same school instead of 12 schools. So there's benefits and there's problems, but the money amount is not
the high on my list for that part of it. Thank you.
Mrs. Santiago?
Thank you, Madam President. My question is, if this is going to take, phase out, the phase would take about 5 years before you see savings and so forth. What challenges would we see, should the district expect between now and those 5 years?
Well, right now, the challenge would just be in the operation of making the changes. And we would just have to realign everything. Other than that, I don't really see any other challenges for the transportation department particularly.
Thank you.
Mr. Stratton?
Thank you, Madam President. I'm just wondering if this plan is in violation of the consent decree.
Yeah, I don't have the answer to that question.
Well, based on the diversity that was in the previous slide, families are still being provided choice. They're just being provided choice within that zone. And the demographics, as you can see from that particular slide, you can see they're pretty close to what they are now.
I just want to make sure that we don't go ahead with a plan that's hasn't been reviewed by the attorneys to make sure that the consent decree is not in violation.
Dr. Henderson?
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, just a quick question. I'm one of those parents who relies on my parents to help my daughter get onto and off of the bus. And while it's great that my parents are still within district, they would not be in the same zone that I reside in, which would be, I think, a complicating factor for a lot of parents within the district who might be relying on relatives who might necessarily live next door, but still within the district to be of assistance to their kids. We know the extended family members are really important. Have we looked into that impact at all, and how that might affect children's ability to get onto and off of the bus? Or does that now mean that with those kids, the parents would be directly responsible for picking them up and dropping them off? Thanks.
Right, they would have to have a bus stop located within the zone that they attend. This is, in most districts, that's how it's set up. So they would, like in your case, your parents maybe could go to your house and meet your children at the bus.
Yeah, I just don't know how realistic that is. I mean, especially with obviously the bus times get adjusted now compared to what they currently are. But for instance, like my daughter doesn't even get picked up on the bus until I'm at work for an hour. So, and then doing that in the morning and in the afternoon, I definitely think those are some conveniences that need to be looked at heavily, because especially right now, there's a lot of people that are relying on the flexibility of their family members and other support members of their family to keep their kids educated. So that would just be my 2 cents on that. I think that part should be looked at. Thank you.
I have a question also, Mrs. Coyne. My question is, $300,000 to $400,000 sounds like a lot of money to an average person. What is the budget for transportation for the district?
Right now, it's about 15 million.
So my statement would be, sometimes things like what Dr. Henderson said are really worth a lot more than the heartache and moving of students to make a zone for $300,000 to $400,000 out of a $15 million budget. So I think we really need to think about this one a little bit more. I'm not thrilled, especially with where Gidney Avenue is and how that's going to be affected. So I think there's a lot to talk about still. Mr. Stratton, go ahead.
Yeah, I understand that point about the finances. I think the bigger, one of the other things is the ride, the length of time on a bus. especially for some younger kids, if they're on the bus for an hour before they get to school, driving around all over the district. I don't think it makes any sense, because by the time they get to school, they may be distracted. They may have all kinds of problems on the bus. So I actually like this idea. I think, families, when they purchase a house or figure out where they're going to live, they look at the school that's closest to them to see what does it look like. That's the one thing I did when I was looking for a house. I drove to see the schools in the area. So as a real estate aspect of this, it will change things for deciding where people pick to choose to live.
Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Madam President. And dovetailing on what Mr. Stridiron just said, and also what Mr. Henderson said, I think that what we need to do, I understand this is a cost-saving measure, but then when you compare it to the total budget, that has to be considered. But what I want us to understand as a board and as a governance body is the idea of neighborhood schools and what it connotated, what it meant before, and understanding as a board that we need to be equitable in our distribution of resources, manpower, and everything if we decide to go in this direction. Because when you start going in the direction of neighborhood schools, there's other issues that entails, and we need to be mindful of that.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Somebody else had their hand up, but it's going. Dr. Henderson, did you want to say something else? You okay?
I'm good, Madam President. Thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Mayda.
I just to have a comment similar to what Dr. Henderson is saying and Mr. Howard. Sometimes there isn't a choice of where certain families can live. And I think that's a really important part of our community, because things happen. Parents have to move for whatever reason. And that may not be in the zone. And how can we deal with that? I'm not sure. Thank you.
So,
Anybody else? Any other questions or comments? Mr. Levenstein.
So just one, and maybe as a board, we have to sit down and figure out, is our directive to central office to get the transportation down as low as possible? Or is it to look at what would be cut by doing that and make a decision if it's worth it? So, I mean, instead of having them spin their wheels figuratively, should we should make that decision? Thank you.
Mrs. Burton? I guess not. I
am here. I'm listening, but I have some things going on. But I am here. So I'm just curious in terms of the busing and the school situation. I heard what Mr. Howard said. I would think that, or what I'm asking is, we have certain funding that is dedicated to integration, Title I funds. And so I would think that the funds will move with the kids, and the funds will be then allocated to those who most need it. And then how have you taken into account the racial racial breakdown of these new community schools, so to speak?
Mrs. Santiago.
You didn't even hear me.
Thank you, Madam President. So my question is, of the savings that was reported with a possible $300,000 to $400,000, is that before reimbursement or after?
That would be the cost savings before reimbursement. That's what we would save as far as payment to the bus contractors.
Okay, so our state aid, so after state aid, it would be much less, correct? All right, thank you.
I'm going to comment before I call on Dr. Padilla. I worked in another school district that was very close to this one. And when a student moved across the street, they had to change schools. Studies show that every time a student moves schools, moves a different place and has to start over, they lose approximately 2 years. We cannot afford that for our kids. One of the glorious things about being in the Newburgh School District was wherever you were in Newburgh and wherever you moved, you could still go to the same school. This impacts our elementary schools, not so much for our middles and high school. So I think that's really, it needs to be taken into account. How many of our kids move from place to place, and how many of our kids would be impacted if they move even close by to have to go to another school in a different zone? I think we really need to think about that seriously. Dr. Padilla, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was gonna just kind of summarize where we're at and then just ask the board to give a little direction to us to say, please prioritize these two things, okay? So right now we set out with a transportation committee that took several years. We had the consultant, you guys all, all that work. The goal here was to make our transportation system more efficient, save money. As you know, 15 million and the costs just continue to go up. So money we can save here can be repurposed to do other key things that we have to do. Less time on buses for students, later time for secondary students. And you guys, if you remember, maybe 2 years ago, we shared some science behind that. Phasing in overtime, so that way it would only start with kindergartners. And what we didn't share was that we need to, and this kind of dovetails a little bit on what Ms. Maneo just mentioned, we need to be very conscious of those kinds of scenarios that do come up. And this is why we think having an appeal process might help with that. So for a family experiencing hardship, for a family that we imagine there'll be some families that won't want to wait the 5 years. You have a second grader now and they want to go into their new zone. That would be something we would consider, if they wanted to choose that. But an appeal process would allow us to hear those cases that do come up and allow us to be a little bit flexible when these variables that sometimes are hard to account for present themselves. So I just want to add that one appeal process component for families that do have hardships from time to time and have valid reasons why they need to live in the town of Newburgh but attend school in New Windsor. So more efficient system, save money, less time on buses, later start time, phasing in, and having an appeal process. There's about 6 different key things that speaks to operations and trying to reduce costs. What would the board like us to prioritize so that way when we come back to you, we provide more information in that area?
My suggestion, Dr. Padilla, why don't you do a survey of the board, put out like a survey monkey, have them get back to you, because this is very tricky. What I'm hearing is this is good for secondary and it's not so great for elementary. So I really, I will have a lot to say about this one on a survey.
Okay, we'll definitely do that. Thank you for that. Okay, we're gonna move on to the next item, and that is an update on our capital project. So Mr. Ramjug.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Padilla. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. I'll start with our pool construction, which is moving along exceptionally well, both on schedule as well as fiscally, and that includes the renovation of the boys and girls locker room. At this time, the core scope of work is the refurbishment of the basin of the tile in the basin of the pool, and that includes a regrouting. From a schedule perspective, it's starting to emerge now that on or about the middle to the third week of March, the lion's share of the work will be complete, minus the water treatment and a few other demobilization things. So we're targeting that time, minus no unforeseens. We still have a couple of items that have to be yet planned out, but it's moving along exceptionally well. The second piece I wanted to share with you was about our energy performance contract, which the core scope of work there right now, or the only scope of work there right now, is the installation of the automated building controls in all of our facilities. So far, we have the following buildings are complete, which are NFA Main, NFA West, Gardner Town, Foster Town, the Chestnut Street, as well as the Board of Education facility. It's important to note that the contractual responsibilities for maintaining this system still lies with the contractor, ITC. So with the extreme temperatures that have been upon us for the last week, we put a very effective real-time responsive communication structure in place. Simply, any calls within the building funnel towards the main office, and the main office will send out real-time communication to everyone that needs to respond. But the truth of the matter is the company is monitoring the systems with the building automation technology well in advance, as early as 6 o'clock in the morning. So we've had just maybe one or two of those notifications. And so there too, things are going well. Our capital design process is probably moving ahead the most aggressively with the new CTE facility, Heritage Middle School, Vales Gate Elementary, as well as New Windsor. And there is a secondary component to New Windsor, which really is the demolition of the tower building. So here this evening to share those specifics with you are Ms. Lauren Tarzio from Clark Patterson Lee. Lauren?
Good evening, everyone. As Roger mentioned, we have 4 active design projects underway, and I will take you through an update on each of them. If I could have the next slide, please. So the first of which is the CTE Building. This is the new building that will be up on the hill just above NFA Main. We've broken this project up into 2 phases. Phase A would be the site clearing aspect of the project. So this is to get a group of contractors in to clear the trees, do some rough grading. There are 2 buildings on the site that would need to be demolished. We are scheduled to go to SED with the submission with that at the end of this month, which coincidentally is on Friday. We're looking to bid that in the spring and then construct it in the fall of 21 and spring of 22. And the idea behind that is to get the site ready for the building contractors to come in. We could potentially get some better numbers if the building contractors can come in and see a cleared site. They can see really what they're getting into. So that's the catalyst behind separating this project into 2 different projects. So then phase B, which we're under design with, is the building and the site improvements portion of the project. So that one, we submitted the preliminary submission to SED on November 13th. And that is for SED to get an understanding of the spaces and really determine the building aid for that building. So we've been conducting user group meetings over the last few months. Most of late, we have done the culinary user group meeting, which was the first one with our consultant. Over the next month or so, we'll be talking about the exterior facade. We'll have some interior design and furniture meetings, and then we'll be starting to talk about the mechanical design and what that would look like. So ultimately speaking, The Phase B portion of this project would be going to SED for a final submission in October of this year. And then we're looking to bid this as well in the spring of 2022. Next slide, please. So Vales Gate Elementary, we finished up our user group meetings last month. So we're working through the design, trying to get this ready for a final submission to SED, which we're looking to do in early March. And then over the course of the next month, the district will be working with their furniture vendor on selecting the appropriate furniture for the spaces that we'll be renovating. So as I said, we'll go to SED in March, and then our bid schedule is looking to be like a June bidding for this project. So as you can see, we've made some renderings. We've used these with the user groups, and they've been pretty successful in how we can communicate our ideas to the groups. Next slide, please. Heritage Middle School, this is the cafeteria edition. We have finished, this past month, we finished our interior design and furniture meetings. We submitted the preliminary submission for this project a couple weeks ago, and we're looking to do our final submission to SED at the end of this week. This is also on the same trajectory as Vales Gate, and we're looking for a June bid timeframe. And again, go back one. Just again, these are some examples of the renderings we use when we're talking about the furniture and the interiors, and we have a couple different seating options that we went through with the user groups. So just a good visual for you guys. Okay, next slide. Lastly, we have New Windsor. This is another project, as Roger mentioned, we're breaking up into two separate phases. So phase A of this project is the tower demolition. We're looking to go to SED with that at the end of this week. And this is, again, the tower comes down. We prep the site so that the contractors can come in. They have a clean slate to work with for the building project. That is scheduled to bid in May. And then phase B would be the addition work. We're starting our heavy duty user group meetings in February. This is where we meet with all of the users in detail for the specific spaces. So we want to talk to administration about the main office. We want to talk to the different classroom level teachers about what they do in their classrooms, really get an understanding of how the spaces are utilized and how we can best accommodate those in the design. With this one, we are also looking to start meeting about the mechanical design, and that will happen in March. And then ultimately, we're looking at a final SED submission in September. So that was a quick overview of where we are with all the schedules. Everything is going pretty well for the most part. We're coming along with the design, and I think the users are very happy with how the process is going. So I will open it up for any questions.
Board members, any questions on this item? Mr. Walker, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Has there been a survey of the environmental impact at the CTE site?
Yeah, if you recall back before we voted, there's a process we go through called Seeker, and that's where we do an environmental assessment of what our building projects might do to the environment. And that came back as a negative impact.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Stridiron?
Has there been a phase 1 archaeological study on the site that's with the State Historic Preservation?
So we've recently submitted to SHPO, State Historic Preservation Office. They did come back and requested an archaeological survey. So we're in the process of getting that scheduled. And what that means is an archaeologist will come out and they'll dig test pits on a grid pattern throughout the site. And he'll write a report and see what the determination will be from there. So we're in process with that.
Any other questions, board members? Thank you, Ms. Tarzio. Thank you, Mr. Ramjad.
Yeah.
Okay, and then my last item is 2.4, and I'm going to turn it over to our director of the Newburgh Teacher Center, who otherwise goes by G.
Thanks, Dr. Padilla. Good evening, everyone. As most of you now know, I'm G. Pinheiro, the coordinator for the Teacher Center. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Newburgh Teacher Center. It's my pleasure to congratulate Melissa Higgins and Yvette Sosnick on their achievement of becoming National Board Certified Teachers. So congratulations to them. I'm sorry we can't be in person to do this. I do want to say thank you to Stacy Moran and the NTA, along with Dr. Padilla and the Newburgh and Large City School District, for all their collaboration so as to give teachers, the opportunity to achieve National Board Certification. This is a really long process for them. It's a lot of work. They put a lot of time into this, and it really is a really great accomplishment. So once again, congratulations to Melissa and Yvette on this really great achievement. I would like to turn it over to Kathy Young and Sharon Kennedy, who are here, who are nationally certified teachers. We're just going to go over the process a little bit briefly. And they are also the counselors for the cohort. They kind of help them along their process so they can get certified. So I think, Kathy, you were going to speak. So I know that Melissa's here, and I'm not sure if Yvette's here because I can't see it on the little grid. But congratulations to both of you. And thank you again for having me and for having the presentation tonight, Dr. Padilla. Kathy?
Thank you, G. Can you hear me? I'm so used to, all right, yes, okay. So first of all, I want to say thank you to the district and for their support of the Teacher Center, which then supports our teachers who are pursuing National Board Certification. Because without the Teacher Center, we would have a lot of floundering candidates and we wouldn't be where we are today. So thank you for that support. And I know in many years it's a rough choice to have to make, but I think you guys are making the right one every year. All right, National Board Certification, for those of you who don't know, is a voluntary process designed for teachers to demonstrate through standards-based evidence the positive impact that they have on student learning as a result of their deep and abiding understanding of their students and their content knowledge, their pedagogical practice, ongoing reflection, and participation in learning communities. Those candidates for National Board Certification must submit a body of work in 4 separate chunks called components. When those are combined and a successful score is achieved, that means that the teacher has demonstrated accomplished teaching. And this process can take from anywhere from 1 to 5 years. The candidates can choose to try them all at once or spread them out over time. No more do or die all at once process, which I think is a lot better for candidates and much more realistic. For those of you who don't know, the State University of New York recognizes those teachers who have achieved National Board Certification as having the equivalence of a doctorate degree in the pedagogy of their certification area. Currently, only 3% of teachers nationwide are nationally board certified, and Newburgh should be really proud that we have 26 teachers. We've had 26 teachers certify as as National Board Certified Teachers since we began support of the program through the Newburgh Teacher Center here in the district. And we should continue to encourage all our qualified teachers in the district to pursue National Board Certification because it does have such an incredible impact on our students. So tonight, as G said, we'd like to recognize our 2 newest National Board Certified teachers. We have Melissa Higgins from Temple Hill. Yay, Melissa. Melissa is certified as an English as a new language in the early and middle childhood certification area. And then Yvette Sosnick from Bombville Elementary, who's certified in literacy, which is part of the language arts in the early and middle childhood certification area. So I just want to say congratulations to those 2 wonderful teachers. And we're going to have more, I promise. We've got lots of people out there working on this. So I don't know, Sharon, did you want to add anything?
So I'd just like to echo, good morning, good afternoon, boys and girls. Wow. Creature of habit, sorry. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having me. I would just like to echo the sentiments of Mr. Pinheiro and Kathleen. Congratulations to both Yvette and Melissa. I've worked with them along their process. You are well-deserved in the accomplishment that you have achieved. Again, I also want to thank and acknowledge that continued partnership between the Newburgh District, the Newburgh Teachers Association, the Newburgh Teacher Center, and this Board of Education. It is their exceptional support that they provide to candidates through this very arduous yet very rewarding process that is invaluable to them. So thank you again for the time to recognize these two candidates and now certified teachers. And I apologize that we can't be there in person, but thank you for this opportunity.
Board members, besides congratulations, and this is really wonderful. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add? And thank you very much, Mr. Pinheiro and ladies. It's been really a great program.
Yeah, let me also echo those sentiments. Just, G, thank you for the work you're doing with the center, and Kathy and Sharon. Sharon, thank you for that laugh, by the way. I don't know the last time we were called boys and girls, but that was really, really spot on. And then to Melissa and Yvette, just know we're very proud of you. Thank you for representing the best of us. We completely understand how much hard work this was for you to get through, and you did it. So you will absolutely be a model for other teachers who are kind of thinking about whether or not this is something they want to do. I hope they can turn to you for guidance. And when we do get a chance to be back in person, rest assured we'll have you come in person so we can congratulate you at that time as well. Thank you, and congratulations again. Okay, Madam President, that concludes my items for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Padilla. We're going to move on. Public comments on agenda items. Mr. McCoy.
There is no public comment on agenda or non-agenda items, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. We're going to move on to my section, which leads us to our External Compliance Officer, Dr. Lloyd Jager, for a mid-year update. Dr. Jager.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Padilla. I appreciate the chance to be with you this evening. I want to also publicly thank you for renewing my opportunity to be of service in this capacity during the 2020-21 school year. When we were last together, you will recall in June of 2020 that my end of year compliance report with respect to policies 5100 on student attendance and 5411 with respect to participation in interscholastic sports and extracurricular activities made several findings, but in brief, our conclusion was that these policies had served a vital purpose in creating a sense of rigor and integrity to the opportunities to participate in interscholastic athletics, but it had come at a significant operational cost. The effort to maintain daily records of student activity, student attendance, to turn that into daily roster reports, the burden of carrying the policies was perhaps greater than necessary. And I advised a process of considering revisions that would be appropriate, that would allow for participation in activities, but look vitally at the role of the rigor and academic participation in the main part of the schedule. The board and the administration have in fact taken just that route during the 2021 school year. By the time I rejoined you in November, you had already made revisions to your 5100 student attendance policy, and you were in the consideration phase with respect to 5411. This evening, in fact, there is an opportunity for you to consider a January update to the 5411 student activity policy. I'd like to make some observations about what my last 8 weeks have been like working with your staff, your senior staff at the district level, in consideration of the evolution of 5411. The board has already adopted policy changes in October of this year to move from an attendance-based system of eligibility to other means. With the proposal before you this evening, it is now evolving further to be one that will fulfill the accountability impetus for these policies by including important thresholds that are going to substantiate academic progress in advance of earned eligibility through credits earned, and to the extent that there are students who have failed particular bodies of coursework, there will be requirements for completion of credit recovery, course contracts, and/or summer school as a recurring means of ensuring that the intentions of 5100, which are student attendance and access to learning, is the primary goal of the system. 5411 is the right to participate in other activities, but provided one has earned those rights by being a good citizen as well as a thriving student. So I do believe that in looking to move away from the clerical machinations of observing eligibility to one of academic press, academic impetus, so that the credits earned all year long, not just during one's participation in seasonal activities, become much more the focus of student participation in your programs. And the monitoring of this at the building levels and at the activity levels, along with referrals to interventions that already exist. You have strong procedural plans for referrals for interventions. Linking those more directly, I do believe, is going to strengthen your system. All this being said, I think it is worth the board understanding that in shifting, and should you adopt 5411, shifting in this direction in anticipation of the potential reopening of athletic activities and other extracurricular activities as early as the winter season, perhaps not till spring. But in doing that, the question might reasonably ask of me as your compliance officer, what is it that we are going to be monitoring with respect to compliance? Some of that emerged in the anomalies of my reviews with the staff over the 8 weeks of November through this evening explicitly. There were variables about what participation in class meant as opposed to attendance. There were variables with respect to the means of documenting those at the teacher and the school level. There were variables with respect to the consistency of backup systems on a personal level and record-keeping system. So one of the things for us to monitor is that in the recognition that the attendance period for eligibility will recommence on January 30th through the end of the year, is for me to be sampling the activities of the district and accounting for consistent participation processes, the training of staff to do that, the record keeping with respect to referrals, the maintenance of records that would allow for a decision to be made at the end of this year about whether a 91% standard of attendance had been kept by those who wish to be eligible next year, notification to parents and students about the 4.5 credit passing of courses, credit recovery system, ensuring that the personnel processes of identifying students at risk and getting them their interventions were actually happening, the creation of at-risk lists, referral and interventions, evidence of credit recovery completions. All those become important things to see whether we have the systems for keeping the appropriate records for learning as it is happening in classrooms. I also want to suggest that unlike our conversation last year, the board has taken action with administrative recommendation in September to adopt a new grading policy 5502. That had not been part of our conversation in the past, but I do believe it is relevant because it does call for both formal and informal assignments to be assigned as part of coursework in every 5-week period, but definitionally, the definition of informal assignments includes the involvement of students and their engagement and participation in daily classwork. And this has been one of the subjects of that I recall had anomalies in your first semester this year that is now being explicitly corrected in the defining process going forward. So daily classwork, student engagement in learning becomes part of grading. This is more than just checking off boxes of I was present or I'm not present, or I wasn't present and I submitted my assignment. It is actually the engagement process and accounting for that as part of grading that I think will be a meaningful addition, and we should explore how that is being accomplished as we go through the rest of the year. So I do expect to be talking with you again as your external compliance officer. I do believe also that accountability will be the name of the game for the success of these 3 policies going forward. And that means from the top to the end user of your district. It includes your district personnel working directly with your principals with expectations and creating the guidance necessary to do their supervisory and developmental work. It includes your principals consistently doing that with your teachers and intervention personnel. And finally, and most importantly, that teachers and students and families are informed and have a chance to work together productively to result in improved learning outcomes, as well as the equitable right to participate in extracurricular activities. This is a mid-course correction process that is before you tonight in January. The administration is being bold in bringing forward to you the shifts that I believe they know are worthy of being made to ensure that your policies will have integrity. I do encourage you to give that positive consideration in your deliberations this evening, and I look forward to working with you further throughout the balance of the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jager. Anybody have any questions, board members? Mr. Stridham?
Thank you, Madam President. Oh boy, I don't know where to begin. So Dr. Yeager, thank you so much for all your efforts with the attendance and the oversight. Originally, you came on board as an investigator, as the board hired you to investigate after the DA's report came out on attendance. A few months after that, the board decided to change the routing of your focus to more of looking forward instead of looking at what happened. So am I hearing what you're saying, that the attendance from the first half of this school year is not going to be taken into account for the participation in in the sports or the extracurriculars?
Well, there's yes and no to that, sir, and thanks for the question. The administration has, and the board actually in its revisions to date, have continued the eligibility elements coming out of 2021 and are going to be looking at any student who has earned 4.5 credits as of the end of 2021, I'm sorry, 1920, last June, and had 91% attendance, they automatically are eligible for second semester activities. And attendance, as it may affect their consideration of eligibility in the fall first semester, will not interrupt that earned eligibility that they had before. For those students who are newly seeking to become eligible, they will not be held to a 91% standard of attendance in the fall. There may be other things that are looked at with respect to their compliance with your code of discipline and other factors. But there is going to be an opportunity for students to engage this second semester. One of the things, sir, that I think you all are acknowledging is that there has been no first semester in New York State public school history, at least that any of us can remember, till perhaps going back to the flu epidemic of the early 1900s. Certainly in our time, we've never had to create platforms for instruction that have evolved over time on so many different fronts at the same time. And the response to that inside of both the reality of providing that learning and the reality of homes adjusting and supporting those learning circumstances has been unique. The district's overall attendance rate is running shy of what you're all hoping to achieve. I believe my last number that I heard is overall student attendance is running something like 75 to 80% zone about students attending. But more important than attendance is the participation in learning and strengthening the hybrid learning system that you have. So yes, there is a bracketing to have a stronger second semester. There is, I don't want to say complete forgiveness with respect to what's transpired in first semester, but earned eligibility will not be interrupted, and opportunity to participate will be restarted within rigorous oversight.
Is that percentage, that attendance percentage, pre-verification and modification to attendance or post?
Well, that's an excellent question. I would say that number, as it was shared with me, was before my recommendation that a certification process be undertaken. It was clear to me that because the policy and procedures allowed for revisions of attendance to be made, that process was being undertaken, and there was a sufficient number of requests to change attendance that it would, the only way as your compliance officer that I believed that we could draw a line in the sand and say no more was to go through a level 0 certification requirement that gradually decreased and decreased and decreased the opportunity for somebody within the system to bring forward an ostensible need to correct an attendance date, and that be brought to a close so that we could then go forward with the rigorous observation of participation as a way of earning attendance. So I don't know what your number is running post certification, sir. That might be something to follow up with district administration.
Does it concern you at all regarding what qualifies as attending class? Because
well, I think
I have
all
kids,
of my, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting, I apologize.
I have kids in the system. And so what qualifies as attending class is so watered down that the kids that actually show up every day and do the work don't feel that's equitable for students that don't show up anytime to be counted as attending. And so I would say, you use the word equity all the time, but how is it equitable to the students that put the hard work in every day, that put that show up, that get up early and they go to class all day long? How are they treated the same as far as attendance and also grading as students that don't do the work and they put here on the paper, or they put I'm present, and they get counted as present in the class and they get the minimum grade of 55.
Okay, I'm gonna, Dr. Padilla has his hand up, so
Yeah,
you
just
want
want
to
to
respond to that?
Thank you. I just want to be careful of not conflating grading and quality of work with attendance, because those are two different things. And I'm going to ask Ms. Peterson to just chime in because the breakdown of attendance and what is allowed or not allowed this year is set by New York State. So Ms. Peterson.
So in the opening plan that the state provided districts around guidance, it talked about what teaching and learning, instruction, and what can be counted as participation. The state understood that we were in a pandemic and families have various means of accessing said instruction. So for teaching and learning, they went through the definitions of what asynchronous, in-person, and synchronous learning constitutes. And they also gave districts examples of what that looked like. So for many students and families who have a variety of different reasons that they can or cannot attend due to the pandemic, the state said, we understand and we support you as long as you are interacting with your teacher daily. Those lessons are developed and designed by teachers, and that you were given feedback to improve your learning. So for the first time in history, New York State has actually broadened what the definition of attendance is. And it has allowed flexibility for students and families who, for whatever reason within their households, can't participate for that day.
Mr. Stradone, I see your hand again.
Thank you for that description of what constitutes attendance, and it's from the state. So if a student for days at a time hands in an assignment at 11:59 p.m. and says here, doesn't fill out the assignment, just writes here on it, is that student counted as attending class?
The state's definition of asynchronous assignments for students is that is assigned and developed by a teacher based on state learning standards, that the student then hands in said assignment and the teacher gives feedback. So I think that also goes along with the fact, kind of what Dr. Padilla kind of mentioned before, grading is something a little different than attendance. It's a different thing. So the student's grade may reflect their effort and ability within the assignment that they submitted, but we can't count an asynchronous submission of an assignment in that manner. So
that's a yes, they counted as attending, but the grade could be a 55.
But as per New York State Education Department.
So how is that rigor? To me, as a parent, I would expect my leaders in the school to demand more. And I don't think we're getting it. We have kids that are falling behind. Every single group of kids is falling behind. And we're accepting minimal effort and then giving them credit recovery to be able to pass, but they're not learning. The whole point of the education system is to learn, not to show a kid how to get around it. Because when they graduate, they are not going to be productive in our society. So it's up to us to demand rigor. And the policies that I see being presented tonight are anything but equitable, and they're not rigorous.
Thank you. I'm going to call on other people at this point, Mr. Sternine, okay? Dr. Badie, you want to chime in, and then I'm going to call Mr. Howard.
Yeah, I think, Ms. Peterson was, highlighting what is being set by the state. And I just want to be careful of just big generalizations, all right? That most of our kids are turning in assignments just with the word "here" on there. I'm not here to say that's never happened. Of course that's happened, but let's not make the generalization that all kids who are doing asynchronous assignments, that's exactly what they're doing. And we absolutely are demanding more. We're extremely demanding. Our teachers are calling, our principals and our APs are highly involved. Our central administration are involved, and we absolutely are expecting more. But we obviously have to comply with what New York State has put out in terms of guidance and making sure the flexibility is in place for a myriad of reasons for why a child, why a 5-year-old can't get on at 9 o'clock in the morning and needs to wait till their parents get home in order to do the assignment. That's just one example, but there's hundreds of examples of why a child can't get on. Nevertheless, we will continue to expect more and continue to be flexible in accordance with what's been prescribed to us.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Howard?
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam President. First, I'd like to thank Dr. Yeager for his explanation this evening and his delivery of his mindset of what he was here to do and what he has done and where we need to go as a board, as a district, with regards to the policy 5100 and 5411. But more importantly, I think that we need to understand what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a pandemic. We're in a situation now where we got children that are dealing with hardships, and you can't really compare kids with privilege with kids who don't have privilege. I think that we should be more geared and trying to figure out how to help the kids that are struggling instead of being punitive and having a punitive mindset. This is about all of our children, all of our kids. And we constantly have conversations around how to penalize kids. I mean, at some point in time, we need to start having conversations about how can we make it better for our kids? How can we make it better for our scholars? How can we get through this pandemic? How can we get through this COVID-19 situation so that we can all land on our feet on the other side instead of worried about penalizing and being punitive with our children? I'm sorry, I had to say that.
Thank you, Mr. Forget.
Thank you, Madam President. Just one clarification on 5100, the comprehensive student attendance, and just supporting what we heard from Ms. Peterson. Attendance this year under 5100, which parts of that have been suspended. Comprehensive student attendance, when we mark a student present, we're not saying that the student was sitting in a seat from a period of time to an end period of time. What we're saying is they engaged in learning, whether it be through an assignment or a task or any of the modalities that the state defined, that they engaged in some type of an activity to demonstrate that they learned or participated in the New York State Learning Standard for that course. So as opposed to in the past, during a non-pandemic year, when you took attendance, it was you're physically watching that student sit in the class for a point in time beginning to end. That's not the situation this year. The state has clearly defined that there are other ways to determine attendance, and it's not verifying a beginning and ending in time. And I'll address the issues or concerns when we discuss the policy later with regards to how we created it and why we created it.
Thank you, Mr. Baer.
I just want to reiterate, there's no perfect comparisons to what life was like when students were attending in person to what they are now experiencing. But as a teacher, we've all experienced a student who's come to our classroom, we give them a test, they circle random answers, they put their hand on top, they put their head down. They still are attending. They're there. We don't mark them absent for just putting their name on a test and putting their head down. We then follow up. We talk to the kids. We ask them why they did that. We try to get to the root of why they took the path of least resistance. Is it a social emotional issue? Are they giving up? Are they frustrated? That's our job, is to find out the why. So never is that the rule for how our kids are able to demonstrate mastery or how we hold them to rigor, but they're kids and we need to find out why they do those things. And like I said, they're not perfect comparisons, but why would we mark a kid absent who goes into a Google Meet and does little and not follow up? They're still participating, not the way we want them to, just the way in the classroom they may not be participating the way we want them to. But we don't mark them absent for that. We work with them. We try to get them back on track. That's our job as educators in the system.
Thank you, Mr. Stridiron.
Thank you, Madam President. Just in response to Mr. Howard, I do appreciate where he's coming from. And I understand situations that this is not totally in our control. But as leaders, we cannot sit by and water down policy because you say punish kids. We're punishing kids by watering down the policy so much that they can pass without learning. They can get through the system without learning. So as a board member, I support all the other supports that the district provides to students that need help. But to be as a parent, if you see your kid not engaged, you do something about it. So hopefully we as a district are doing that, but I don't expect all my kids to engage at the same level. I understand that, but to just make this into a punishment thing, it's not punishment. You have to have rules as a parent. You have to have rules as a leader. As a district, we have to have rules. And if we keep weakening the rules, I see the sign at NFA last year, attendance matters. We might as well burn that sign up because really it's not. The whole point of the DA's report was that attendance wasn't followed. Dr. Yeager was hired to get those attendance policies in order so that we could implement them. And now it's basically, we're just going to focus on the classroom and not attendance. Attendance is part of learning. If you have a job, you have to attend. You can't just show up and then just get your paycheck. So we're teaching kids how to respond in the future. And I really hope that the board does not approve these policy changes. Thank you.
We are not talking about the policy changes now. We're talking about Dr. Yeager's report. So we're going to talk about that in a few minutes, okay? Or in a minute or two. Mr. Howard, do you have something else to add?
Yes, just two quick things, Madam President. So the assumptions here with a lot of the conversation is that there are parents in the household, and you'll be surprised at a lot of proportion of our district where there aren't able-bodied parents in the household to do the corrective actions that Mr. Stridiron is referring to. But more importantly, we're following the standards that are set by New York State because of the pandemic. We're following those guidelines. These are something that we put in place ourselves. Help me if I'm wrong.
No, that is correct. These are outlined memos that we've received from the state around what instruction should look like, as well as directives from the state around districts' flexibility in setting the standards for students and families. It's mandated within the state guidance and followed up with several memos.
Mr. Stridiron.
Is it possible that we could actually have standards that are even higher than what the state standards are? The standards are just minimums, right?
We're going to move on. Thank you for your opinion, Mr. Stridiron. And thank you very much, Dr. Yeager, for your help with this. And we'll look forward to hearing from you again at the end of the year. So we're going to move on to my 2 items. I have 2 items for your approval tonight. Would any member like to separate out any of those items? Okay. Whoops. I'd like to entertain him. Oh, Mr. Strawn, you have your hand up.
Yes, I'd like to separate each one, actually. Thank you.
Four 4.2. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Questions or discussions on 4.2? That's secondary schools course credit. Mr. Stridiron.
Thank you, Madam President. On, let's see, the secondary school courses, number 3, I believe that it used to include that you'd have a 93% attendance to qualify for a 50 or 55. Is that being removed from the requirement?
Mr. Forget, anybody? Can somebody answer that, please? Mr. Bayer?
Yeah, I can answer it. When we changed our grading policy, I don't have the number committed to memory. The lowest a student can get in the 0 to 4 point scale is a 55. And if you remember, it was based on analysis and a lot of scientific research on the deadly power of a 0, and we're trying to get away from that. So we had to align the policies to make sure that they speak to the same possibility for students who fail.
Yes, Mr. Stridiron.
So basically, you don't have to attend anything and you get a 50 or 55 and then just take this. Do you still need the attendance requirement to qualify for credit recovery?
When we do credit recovery, there's a meeting that occurs. We go through all the names of potential students for credit recovery, and we certainly take attendance into account. We want students who participate in credit recovery who actually want to be involved. So it's not that we don't consider kids who have had really poor attendance if they commit to credit recovery, or really quarterly recovery, but it is one component of our analysis.
So what does that say to a student?
Mr. I want you to be recognized before you ask a question.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. You can ask now.
Thank you. So it's to me, it's again, it's a watering down of the system, because what do you say to a kid who the first 2-3 months of the year knows that he doesn't really have to participate, he or she doesn't have to participate, and can just come back in the 3rd quarter and start doing credit recovery? I mean, to me, you're allowing the students to dictate the result. We as leaders have to set an example, and I don't think this is happening.
Dr. Padilla, would you like to join in?
Yes, ma'am. I just want to kind of state what might be the obvious, but maybe not getting its due attention. And I completely respect philosophical differences when it comes to this. I don't know of any conversation that I observed or even participated in that didn't have philosophical differences as it relates to this. But 55 is still failing. So if you don't do anything and you get a 55, you have failed. I mean, that's the message. You failed. In this case, it just gives you a fighting chance. And I think we've kind of batted this around a little bit over the years and Mr. Baer was just getting to this as well, of what happens when children are completely out of it the 1st and 2nd quarter and have no chance of passing the course, et cetera, et cetera. Just wanted to highlight that, 55 is still failing.
Thank you. Mr. Barry, you don't have, your hand is up. Do you have anything else to say?
Sorry, nope, forgot to put it down.
Thank you. Let's vote on this. Roll call, Mr. Clerk?
Ms. Burton,
No.
Dr. Henderson,
Abstain.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein,
Yes.
Ms. Mayda,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
No.
Mr. Walker.
Yes.
That item passes.
Thank you. We're going to move on to item number 4.3, and that's participation in extracurricular activities and interscholastic athletics. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Mr. Levenstein.
Thank you, Madam President. So in echoing Mr. Howard's thinking, I'm glad that the district is taking the reality of these unusual times and adjusting our policies appropriately. So, but with that said, I just have one question. It seems that there's, and some of it, the way a student can participate is there has to be an academic improvement contract. And I looking that over, the contract includes a coach, an advisor, a student, the parents, counselors, but it doesn't include the teacher. And I'm wondering why in the academic improvement contract, I'm assuming for a specific class, that the teacher wouldn't be part of that, not just the extracurricular teachers. So I was wondering if there was a reason for that being out of that.
Mr. Forget, would you like to answer that?
Yes, Madam President, thank you. Thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Levenstein. That was, teachers were included in the policy in the process of finalizing it. It did get deleted out, so I apologize. We would like to make sure that the word teacher is in that team that is in the design of the contract when we don't have a quarterly recovery opportunity for students who are struggling at the end of the marking period. I do want to make one clarification, Madam President, if you don't mind, from the previous conversation.
Go ahead.
There is an attendance expectation for to continue to participate in extracurricular activities or interscholastic athletics, and that is the attainment of a 91% average daily attendance at the end of each school year. So the 91% attendance and the 4.5 credits remains. So if I want to participate in sports in the spring this year, I would have had to have had a 91% attendance rate for last year in order for me to become eligible to participate this year. And I don't believe that that was clear before. So I just wanted to make sure that that was stated. That remains, and it is also requested to remain in the following year as well.
Thank you. Mr. Stradine, I see your hand.
Thank you, Madam President. On page 3 of the policy, under the eligibility for participation in the 2021-2022 school year, it states that the students must have maintained a minimum of 91% attendance during the 2020-21 school year, but that does not include from September to January. I was wondering why is that taken out for next year's eligibility?
Would anybody respond to that?
Mr. Bear?
I think Dr. Yeager did explain that. It was because when we did an analysis of attendance in the first half of the year, and because of some of the anomalies that came out as we rolled out the virtual hybrid environments, we did analyze students who are eligible for sports to see what their current attendance is for the first half of the year. And we just thought it was the right thing to do for kids, is to have this roll out for the second half of the year. We've been working with coaches to make sure that they have been reinforcing that. We had a coaches meeting to make that clear so they know who their students are that could participate in their sports. And they began to reach out to make sure they understood what the policy is and what the expectations are. We're meeting with the coaches again tomorrow, subsequent to tonight's meeting, to further reinforce the policy and how it applies to them as coaches to support kids. And we're intending with Dr. Badia to have a town hall to ensure that families understand these new policies. We thought, just with all the complexities that have been, I think, thoroughly discussed tonight, it was the right thing to do for students this year.
Mr. Stridarn.
Thank you. Just a reminder that we were told as a board that the attendance from September through December was a success. So if it's such a success, then it should not be removed as a requirement for participation next year. As a follow-up to that, what happens, I don't see anything for the attendance requirements. So say in the fall of 2021, upcoming fall 2021, is there any provision for the attendance in that quarter to count towards participation in an activity?
May I respond, Madam President?
Sure. Yes, Mr. Forget.
So you're saying once I enter into a fall sport, is there an expectation for me to maintain my attendance during that particular period of time? No. What we did was we used the end of the marking period and the passing of the courses for that particular piece. And one of the reasons why we did that was because we're using the 91% attendance for a calendar year. And when you use a calendar year, that takes into account post and pre-season. So holding that standard for them to be eligible, we feel is fair.
Dr. Badia?
Yes, ma'am. I just want, in the spirit of keeping things in context, when we talk about attendance being a success, it's in relation to the spring, which we know in the spring, attendance was a major issue, which is why we made the changes we made in the fall. So I just want to, let's keep it in context, please. We know there are challenges, but the attendance is better than what it was in the spring, and that's the connection.
Mr. Stridarn?
Thank you, Madam President. So it's possible for a student athlete or anybody with extracurricular activity in the fall to know that they don't have to go to class to be able to participate during that same time period, which is different than what we've had in the past. We've actually had where students know that during their season, they have to go. So now we're taking that away and saying they don't even have to go to class during their season.
May I respond, Madam President?
Yes, Mr. Forget.
So Mr. Stridarn, I believe that I'll reiterate the 91% attendance rate for the year. I'll also share with you that we are adding in the academic expectation. In order for a student to pass the marking period or pass the course for that marking period, they're going to need to be engaged in the learning, or they're not going to pass that course during that particular marking period. I would assume that they would have to be present for instruction in order to generate a passing grade on that report card, or I would hope. It's the instruction that's going to get them to pass.
Mr. Stridarn?
By the time you get a passing grade for the class, the season will be over. That's the whole point of having an attendance requirement. So again, I believe this is watered down. I'll end it. I won't even bring this any farther, but I do believe this is going to be a disaster.
Mr. Stridarn, I respect your thoughts. And I do believe that the one consistent piece of data that we can use that's certified at the end of the year is that 91% from the previous year. That is the one piece of data that we can use and all be confident with. And that was our other intention, to make sure that we're using that verified and certified piece of data. So again, I I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate your comments.
Thank you. Mr. Levenstein?
So my question, I guess, is to Mr. Forget or you, Madam President. Are you looking to revise that to include a word teacher, include a word teacher wherever there's an academic improvement contract listing who's involved, or do you want to proceed with it the way it is written and afterward do something with that?
I recommend that we amend and add the word teacher into the team that designs the course quarterly, the quarterly
academic improvement contracts.
Okay, Mr. Levenstein, you're going to have to make that recommendation to amend.
I would like to make a recommendation to amend the proposed 5411 participation for students to include the word teacher in the list of participants in the academic improvement contracts, which is there, it's multiple times in that policy, but to include the word teacher along with what is there, coach, advisor, student, parents, and school counselors.
I need to have a second.
I second that.
Thank you. Can I have a roll call to amend?
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein,
Yes.
Ms. Mayda,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton.
Yes.
Okay, now I need a motion for this amended resolution.
So moved.
The point of order, it's already on the floor amended. You just need a roll call to vote as amended if there's no more discussion.
I think I still see, Mr. Levenstein, your hand is still up. Do you have another question? Mr. Stridiron? I
Thank
thought you
you.
said that was your last statement.
I know. Mr. Forget said about attendance for the next year that the student would have to worry about it. Not if they're seniors. If they're seniors, they're just, it's not going to work. And I really hope that somebody is monitoring this, because if you see students walking around the halls, when hopefully we'll be back at school, then it's going to be a problem.
Thank you. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein,
Yes.
Ms. Mayda,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
No.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our board committees. Policy Committee, Mr. Howard.
Madam President, I would like to yield to you because I was absent for that meeting. If you could just give an update for that policy committee meeting.
Yes, I can. We discussed everything that was on this agenda, as well as viewing all of our policies through an equity lens, and we're going to be working on that. We're going to move to our Library Committee, Mr. Stridiron.
Thank you, Madam President. We met on January 14th, and it was the first meeting for Miss Mary Lou Canalan, and we welcome her to as a library director, and we look forward to many, many years. And we had a personnel section of the meeting, and we discussed a cleaner position and a full-time library clerk at the town branch. Old business was library reopening, the New York State construction aid, and the resolution that is on for tonight to execute a lease agreement at the town branch.
Thank you, Mr. Stridiron. I did the Personnel Committee. All the items discussed at Personnel Committee are included in this agenda. We're going to go to Buildings and Grounds Committee, Mr. Levenstein.
Thank you, Madam President. So Building and Grounds Committee met January 20th. We discussed with Mr. Velez the New York State Education Department's mandated annual visual inspection and New York State Education Department's mandated Building Condition Survey, which occurs every 5 years. We discussed NFA auditorium roof leak, Heritage Middle School floor tile repair, and the GAMS roof. So then we also discussed with Mr. Ramjug, and we moved on resolutions, which are on tonight's finance agenda as items 7.2 to 7.6, and they include the 2021 Building Condition Survey and Scans contract with CPL Architecture, the Energy Performance Contract Amendment number 3, which is substituting almost $2 million worth of solar panels for cogeneration units, an allowance disbursement for the NFA pool project for an unseen condition, and a project labor agreement for all the capital bond projects. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Levenstein. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Student Support Services, Dr. Roman.
Thank you, Madam President. Under the Student Support Services agenda, I present 6.1 recommendations from CSE, CPSE committees for your consideration.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So move.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Levenstein,
Yes.
Miss Mayda. Miss Mayda. Miss Mineo,
Yes.
Miss Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard.
Yes.
Madam President, there's one more item I'm respectfully requesting to add to the agenda.
Would you like to read that item, please?
Mr. McClure, do you have that?
I can read it for Dr. Romans. Be it resolved that the board hereby approves a settlement agreement in the matter of student number 210639 dated January 23rd, 2021. And be it further resolved, the board hereby authorizes Dr. Roberto Padilla, Superintendent of Schools, to sign this settlement agreement on the district's behalf.
I'd like to have a motion to add this to the agenda, please.
So move.
Second.
Roll call to add.
Miss Mayda,
Yes.
Miss Mineo,
Yes.
Miss Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Miss Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein.
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes my items.
We now have to get it. We have to now have another resolution, get it on, to talk about it on the floor. Excuse me, I'm tongue-tied. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So move.
Second.
Questions or discussion on this item? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Miss Mineo,
Yes.
Miss Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Miss Burton,
Abstain.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein,
Yes.
Miss Mayda.
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes my items now.
Thank you, sir. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Finance, Dr. Spindler.
Thank you, Madam President. The Division of Finance presents to you items 7.1 through 7.6 for a consent agenda for your consideration.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Miss Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Miss Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein,
Yes.
Miss Mayda,
Yes.
Miss Mineo.
Yes.
That concludes my items for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Spindler. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, Mr. McLemore.
Thank you, Madam President. On the Human Resources agenda, I have items 8.1 through 8.10 for your consideration on tonight.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Levin, excuse me, Mr. Stritter,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein,
Yes.
Ms. Mayda,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago.
Yes.
That concludes my items, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLemore. We're going to move on to our clerk of the board, Mr. McCoy.
Thank you, Madam President. I have the approval of the minutes from the January 12th, 2021 board meeting.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein,
Yes.
Ms. Mayda,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stritter.
Yes.
That concludes my items, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. We have no public comments on non-agenda items. I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein,
Yes.
Ms. Mayda,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stritter,
Yes.
Mr. Walker.
Yes.